Okay, so we're going to start looking at characteristics of proteins. And that's the third class of biomolecules. We've looked at carbs, right? Remember the carbs? We looked at lipids. We got lipids in our heads, and now we're going to look at proteins. Those are made of monomers, just like carbs were. Made of monomers. You remember monomer is a single. What's the monomer? Does anybody remember what a monomer of proteins are? Yeah, they're amino acids. Amino acids. And those amino acids have a thing called an R group. And if the R group is different, it makes the amino acid different. So what makes an amino acid different from the next one is its R group. But all amino acids have a carboxyl and an amino, right? So they all have that in common. So the only thing that's going to distinguish them is the R group. So we'll talk more about what that means. So what are some functions of proteins? It's crazy. It's just like literally everything that happens in your body is pretty much because of a protein. So one of the big things is they're catalysts or enzymes, right? Enzymes, if you remember, speed up reactions in your body. Super important, right? So if you want to break down food, if you want to make and store fat or whatever, any kind of chemical reaction that occurs in your body is from a protein, a catalyst. What else? So also proteins can form structures. So it forms a structural role like muscles, skin, collagen, cartilage. All these things that you think about are made of proteins. So literally everything about you structurally is because of a protein. And it's actually DNA is what carries the code to make these things in your body. So we use some proteins for storage. We use some proteins for cell communication. So the way cells can communicate to one another is through proteins. So one of those is through what we call peptide hormones. So we always think of hormones as lipids, but a lot of our hormones are also peptides, which are proteins, like serotonin. You ever heard of that one? It's the feel-good one in your brain. I think adrenaline is also a peptide hormone. So a lot of the signals that get sent to all your body comes from proteins or peptide hormones. So they're really, really, really important. We also use them for transport. So like on the cell membrane, you have protein transporters. And we'll talk about that in the next unit. But I like to kind of dip your toe in the water a little bit. So embedded in that double membrane that we looked at the last. So do you remember over here? So embedded in this membrane, you have these proteins that are embedded that allow molecules to go through it, like little tunnel slides. You know, do you ever play in a tunnel slide on the playground? So they're made of proteins and they allow molecules to slide through them because they fit certain molecules. So it's kind of interesting. And the last thing, they also are in defense. So our immune system makes these things called antibodies. And these antibodies are what help fight invaders that come into our body. Okay? So if you notice, pretty much every function you could think of in a living thing comes from a protein. So that's why they become a huge focus for this course. And my pencil just broke and I don't have a spare. So do any of you guys have an extra pencil? Thank you. You're the best. Okay, so what does that building block look like? So we're looking at the monomer here. So you start with a C, and here's your carboxyl, right? There's your carboxyl, and there's your amino. And that's why we call it an amino acid. What? That's a carboxylic acid. This is our amino, right? If you want to put these two together, we showed you this in our, here's another amino acid. Let's do another one. Remember, the R group is what makes it different, and we'll look at those R groups in a minute. Here's another amino acid. If I want to put these two together, what do I need to do? Talk to your partners. Go ahead. Take a second. If I want to put these two amino acids together, what has to happen? You've learned this before. It's not hard. What is it, guys? Yep, we're going to dehydration synthesis. And you already know what this is. We have to pull out what? We have to pull out H2O. So we're going to take an OH from one, and we're going to take an H from the other, and these two are going to come out as water, H2O. And when that happens, this is now freed up. We have a bond that gets to be freed up, and we're going to make a bond between these two. This bond, the yellow bond that I just made, is called a peptide bond. All a peptide bond is a bond between two amino acids. Pretty easy, right? And then if I wanted to go in the opposite direction and I wanted to hydrolyze this, what would I have to do? Add water and then break the peptide bond with some enzymes. We'd probably have to use an enzyme, probably called peptidase. By the way, many enzymes are ending in ASE. What did all the sugars end in? Do you remember? OSE. Do you remember that? All the sugars were OS. All the enzymes are ACE. Many enzymes are ACE. A lot of the amino acids are, do you know what they end in? INE. Ene, like amine, cysteine, glutamine. A lot of those are end with INE. So a lot of times you can look at the word and you know what it is just by looking at the name. Okay? We are not doing this. This is icky chemistry that I don't want to do. It's kind of annoying. But let's look at the R groups. So how we classify an amino acid is based on its R group, or what we call the side chain. So let's look here at some of these examples. The R group, here's the R group. Here's a different R group. Here's a different R group. And here's a different R group. Notice the backbone stays the same. You always have an amino and a carboxylic acid, an amino and a carboxylic acid. All of these have the same backbone, but they have different R groups, and that's what makes them different. So if you look at this first one, this R group is nonpolar, right? This is a nonpolar R group. And you can tell it's just carbon chain, right? It's pretty easy. Carbon chain. And if you look here, look at this R group. For sure it's polar. It's got an oxygen there, right? This R group's polar. We can even further classify it, but we don't really care so much for this class. We can even further clarify polar acidic or polar basic. Does it give up a hydrogen or does it take a hydrogen? So remember, acids give up a hydrogen to solution. Bases take hydrogens in solution. And then lastly, we are going to talk about a peptide bond. It's a bond that forms between two amino acids. And when we say a polypeptide, is many